Shalom. Today we're going to be picking up in our study of the Shoftim, the Judges, picking up where we left off last week. So we'll be in the first verse of chapter 13 of that book. If everyone will turn there. I actually did something last week that I almost never do. Okay, even though I hate a lot of the chapter breaks in Scripture because they're false, they're put in there. Then I get why they were put in there from the study point of view, the teaching point of view. They were put in there to make it easier to reference things and find things. If you put a scripture, it's easier to help people know where you're coming from. I get that. I believe the enemy, although has used it to create a false divide in Scripture where it's not supposed to be, and to get us to only read the chapter or only read the verse and not read the context. And so I ended last week by reading the first verse of this week's lesson. And the first verse says, "Again, the people of Yisrael did what was evil from Yehovah's perspective, and Yehovah handed them over to the Philistine for 40 years. Things were pretty good when the people were following the Shoftim. Okay, Shoph would come into authority. People would recognize him or her and would follow along and hear the Torah. Okay, now just before this talk, we were talking about the difference between being a Karaite Messianic and a rabbinical Messianic. And most Messianics today are rabbinical, and we were talking about they're following the Talmud, which there's a lot of good in the Talmud. Okay, I'm not 100% against the Talmud. What I'm against is people who say I'm a Talmid of the Talmud. Okay, because the men who wrote the Talmud were trying to be the Talmid of Torah. Okay, they were trying to follow the Torah, but in a lot of ways, because they were in captivity. Okay, most of what we have in the Talmud was written during the Babylonian captivity. Some of it came later, but a lot of these customs were developed outside of Eretz Yisrael, and they were written at a time when we were under the authority of a pagan nation. Okay, and so a lot of the traditions that came about, that developed, aren't really Torah-based. And so we fall into that trap, or it's easy to fall into that trap of being the student of the rabbi rather than the student of the word. Okay? So what happened here was that when the Shoph would lead the people back into Torah, we would be blessed. We would have peace. The land would be at peace. If there was a war, we would always be victorious. And then we found the cycle of apostasy. We would get out from underneath that shelf. Oh, goodness. Nobody's going to be so strict on me now. Nobody's going to constantly be harping at me about what the word says. I'm just going to do what sounds good. Oh, by the way, what this guy's over here doing sounds good. And they would follow along. And they would do what was evil in whose eyes? In Yehovah's eyes. Okay? So we have to be very careful that we gauge what we're doing according to what Torah says is acceptable to him. Because the world, the professing quote-unquote church, even a lot of Messianics, unfortunately, are still caught up in traditions that say this is right and this is wrong. And sometimes they're exactly the opposite. Sometimes they're exactly the opposite of what the word says. In the earlier teaching, I was talking about how the children of Esau, once his name was changed to Edom by other men, fell into the trap of tracing their lineages matrilinearly. And so it's been lost and needs to be rediscovered and reintroduced, their connection as B'nai Abraham, because they've dissociated from it, and that's part of where the problems in the family, so to speak, come from. That was a tradition. It came down into Orthodox Judaism. That's the tradition. Okay, but the Torah says we trace it through our fathers, and that's just one of many instances where we need to be careful and make sure that we're following the Torah and not the Talmud, because it will lead us into, unfortunately, some of that same apostasy. There was a man from Zorah, from the family of Dan. Listen up. This is your family. Think about that. This is mom's family. Your mother's father's mother, who you did not meet, but I met, was a wonderful, godly woman. This is her family. From the family of Dan, whose name was Manoch. His wife was barren, childless. The angel of Yehovah appeared to the woman and said to his wife, or said to her, "Listen, you are barren. You haven't had a child, but you will conceive and bear a son. Now, therefore, be careful not to drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor, and don't eat anything unclean, for indeed you will conceive and bear a son. No razor is to touch his head, because the child will be a Nazir before Elohim from the womb. Moreover, he will begin to rescue Yisrael from the power of the Philistine." I want you to think about something. The church and a lot of Messianics today get really frustrated with the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox and Reform and conservative Jews and all the other sects out there and say, can't they see? They talk about Yeshua HaMashiach, and they say, can't they see? He must be Mashiach. He must be Messiah, because his birth was prophesied, and an angel came to his mother and said, you haven't had a son, but you're going to have a son. Here's the prophecy. Here's what's going to happen. And he's going to rescue the children of Israel. Can't they see? That proves it. You want to know why those people don't buy that argument? Because it's not legitimate. Yes, all of those things happen. It's not enough to make him Mashiach. But a lot of people go to that text in the Brit Hadesh and say, see, that was it. Don't you see? He was prophesied. He was going to come. He was going to save the people. Is that exactly what this woman was just told? You're barren. You don't have a son, but you're going to have a son. It's going to be miraculous. That son is going to save the people. B'nai Yisrael. You know what Miriam was told by the angel? Let's think about some others. Shamuel. Samuel. His mother was barren. Oh, guess what? He's going to be the greatest judge there ever was. The greatest prophet since Moshe. That's why when people make the argument, I used to make this argument to the Orthodox and say, yeah, but you say Yeshua was a prophet. He's the greatest prophet since Moshe. And Moshe said there would be another prophet like him that would bring his death to be the saving of all of Israel. And they say, yeah, some more. You see, the problem here is that people arguing strictly from the Brit Hadesh for the Mashiach status of Yeshua are making the argument without basing it on the context of the Tanakh. Are all these things true about Yeshua? Yes. Is it enough to prove that he's the Mashiach? No. And that's why they look at us, if we make that argument, and I used to do the same thing, and say, don't you see? And then we're like, yeah. And I see 5 other times that it happened in the Tanakh. That's not enough evidence. See, as a born-again believer, I believe the word because I've seen the power and the presence of him in my life, and I've seen the promises here come true. But as a scientist, and that's what I am, as a researcher, I research archaeology for my teachings here. I research mental health things for the work that I do and the books that I'm writing. Okay? As a researcher, I need evidence that is not just what I've seen. I need evidence that is irrefutable. And if we're going to make the argument, if we're going to make the case for his status as Mashiach, we have to have more than what 5 other guys in the Tanakh measure up to. I do a teaching, or did a teaching when I was teaching for Armor of Light regularly. It was called the simple math of Mashiach. Okay. Mathematicians say that it would be improbable. I think the number was 5, something like that. It would be improbable. I think I'd have to look at my notes, but for any one man in history to fulfill, I think it was 5 messianic prophecies. Impossible mathematically for any one man to fulfill like 10 or 15 of them. Okay, and so as I was teaching the class, I would take and I would go through the messianic prophecies that he fulfilled. And once you're up to about 25 or 30 of them, it's really hard to argue with that. If you want to know why people aren't reading what you're telling them in the Word of Dash and believing that Yeshua is the Mashiach, you might stop and think about a lot of skeptics have read the Tanakh and know these things because the rabbis, are telling you and teaching you and saying, don't believe that Yeshua is Mashiach. Because you know that argument they make? Oh, his mom saw an angel and this prophecy happened about his birth. Guess what? It happened here and here and here and here and here. That's not enough. Where's the evidence? And most people trying to witness aren't prepared enough to know all the other things they need to know to prove it. The woman came and told her husband, she said, a man of Elohim came to me. His face was fearsome, like that of the angel of Elohim. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name. But he said to me, listen, you will conceive and bear a son, so now don't drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor, and don't eat anything unclean, because the child will be a Nazir for Elohim from the womb until the day he dies. Now, a lot of people don't understand what a Nazir is. If you want to really understand it, go back and read Numbers chapter 6, I believe it is. But a true Nazir could not eat or drink of the vine, could not shave his head or cut his hair, could not shave his beard ever while he was under the vow. Could not approach a dead body, not even if the dead body was his father, his mother, his sister, or his brother. Someone else still had to do it. If he was standing next to someone and that person fell over dead, he had to go and be ritually cleansed, even if he hadn't touched the body. That's how serious this vow is. And this child who's not yet been born is going to be a Nazir for his entire life. From the womb. How special is that? Now do you see why the Orthodox and all those others, they say, yeah, but Yeshua, he was a Nazir, sure, for like the last 3 days of his life. Personally, I think it was longer than that, but probably more than that anyway, at different points throughout his life. But Scripture doesn't prove that. It only proves it for the last day or so before his execution. And they say, sure, he was a great prophet, but I can show you a man in Tanakh who was a Nazir from the womb, and he wasn't Mashiach. Then Manoah prayed to Yehovah, please, Yehovah, let the man of Elohim you sent come again to us and teach us what we should do for the child who will be born. See, this man understood this is something special about to happen, and he better get it right. Elohim paid attention to what Manoah said, and the angel of Elohim came again to the woman as she sat in the field, but her husband Manoah wasn't with her. The woman hurried and ran to tell her husband, here, that man, the one who came to me the other day, he's come again. Manoah got up, followed his wife, went to the man, and said to him, are you the man who spoke to the woman? He answered, I am. Gee, I wonder who he speaks for. Manoah asked, now, when what you said comes true, what are the guidelines for raising the child? Let me back up for a second to that I am. In Scripture, when Mashiach says things, and they have a whole teaching on it in a lot of mainline churches, here's the proof that he is who he is. How many times did he answer with I am? Once again, teaching strictly from the Brit Hadash, not backed up with the context of the Tanakh. And anyone who knows the Tanakh at all will blow it out of the water and say that's not enough evidence. Why? Because I can show you 5 or 10 places where that happened in the Tanakh. What should be done for him? The angel of Yehovah said to Manoah, the woman should take care to do everything I said to her. She shouldn't eat anything that comes from a grapevine. She shouldn't drink wine or other intoxicating liquor. And she shouldn't eat anything unclean. Gee, I wonder how important eating kosher is if you want to do right by Elohim, if he's about to send a judge, a shofet, to save the people of Yisrael. And he tells the mother of that man before he is born, don't you eat anything unclean. Because even in the womb, he is set apart to me. People in the churches today, they say, why isn't there a generation coming up behind us that is honoring Elohim? What are you doing when they're in the womb? Are you setting them apart? Are you sanctifying them? Are you praying over that womb? Are you making it Kodesh? That child, setting apart from that which is unclean. She should do everything I ordered her to do. Now it gets interesting. Manoah said to the angel of Yehovah, please stay with us a bit longer so that we can cook a young goat for you. The angel of Yehovah said to Manoah, even if I do stay, I won't eat your food. And if you prepare a burnt offering, you must offer it to Yehovah. You see, the angel saw something going on in the man, in the father, who was so excited that he's going to be a father. He's going to be a father to a son. He's going to be a father to a son who is special and set apart from the womb. He was getting ready to fall into the trap of worshiping the messenger instead of the one who sent the message. Now, I'm not going to spend the whole time that it would take to get into how many times throughout history that has happened. That men have worshipped the messenger rather than the one who sent the message. But it happens. It even happens today. There are entire congregations who basically worship the messenger instead of the one who sent the message. And that might be their pastor. It might be someone who was given a prophecy. Woe unto us if we worship the messenger rather than the one who sent the message. For Manoach did not know that it was the angel of Yehovah. Manoach said to the angel of Yehovah, tell us your name, so that when your words come true, we can honor you. Oh, woe to us if we do that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't recognize. In my earlier teaching, I was talking about a very wise old man who tried to teach me something when I was a very young believer, and it took me many years to get it. And he told me, actually, ironically, something about the name and the power and the value of a name and what it tells us about who begot whom and what begot what. But you know what? Did you notice I didn't say the man's name? And I'm not saying it's wrong to ever do that, because it's important to know who we learn these things from. And you guys have heard me talk about different teachers who taught me things. But woe to me and woe to you if I go worshiping that messenger rather than the one who sent the message, and I lead you into that. The angel of Yehovah answered him, why are you asking about my name? It is wonderful. You know, wonderful is one of the names that we are told will be the name of Mashiach. His name will be Wonderful and Counselor. Remember that verse? How easy would it be now for Manoach and his wife to fall into the trap of worshiping the angel? The one whose name is Wonderful. Manoach took the kid and the grain offering and offered them on the rock to Yehovah. You know, I get so many people who say you shouldn't be doing any kind of offerings. You shouldn't even be doing Pesach because we don't have a temple. Have you ever heard that? Where was this man? Was this man in Jerusalem? Was this man on the Temple Mount? No. This man saw Elohim, Yehovah Elohim of Abba Abraham, working in his life in a miraculous way, and he made his offering right there on a rock. Then with Manoach and his wife looking on, the angel did something wonderful. You know, it's interesting, this Hebrew word, and just like when it talks about the names of Mashiach, it doesn't say his name will be wonderful, like literally, hey, I'm going to call you wonderful. It literally means full of wonder. So it's saying, if you know my name, you will be filled with wonder at the things that you're going to see. So he did something full of wonder. As the flame went up toward the sky from the altar, the angel of Yehovah went up in the flame from the altar. Then Manoach and his wife saw it, and when they saw it, they fell on the ground on their faces. They gave homage because they saw something that was full of wonder. How many times have we seen things in our lives that are full of wonder and we don't even acknowledge it? There are people, myself included, who have been guilty of seeing the things full of wonder and not giving the offering on the rock because we're not at the temple. Shame on us. I'd say probably shame on everyone in this room because we're all human and we've all been guilty. But the angel of Yehovah did not appear again to Manoach and his wife. Then Manoach realized it had been the angel of Yehovah. Manoach said to his wife, "We will surely die because we have seen Elohim." Talk about confused and looking through human eyes. He realizes it's the angel of Yehovah. And says, "Surely we will die because we've seen the face of Elohim." He still didn't get it. He still didn't get it. But you know what? There are people today, born again believers, who still don't get it. But his wife said to him, "If Yehovah had wanted to kill us, he wouldn't have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from us, and he wouldn't have shown us all this or told us such things at this time." I want you to think about this. Yehovah, the Elohim of Abraham, doesn't make a promise he's not going to keep. He's not a man. He doesn't tell us he's going to do something and then take it back. Sometimes we misunderstand what he's telling us, like Manoach. He was seeing the promise of the divine, but looking at it through human eyes. I know how frustrating that is because we think we understand what he's saying he's going to do, and we look for it, and it doesn't happen the way we think it's going to happen, and it is so frustrating, and it makes us question everything. And then we work our way around, and really what we need to question is our understanding of what he said, of what he showed us. Because and I've preached this many times, I'm sorry if I bore you with this, but he has two wills. He has his perfect will that will happen if we just obey what he gives us. He has his permissive will, which will happen if we don't. And he permits us to step outside of his rules, his mitzvah, and he allows us to stumble around and fall on our face and cry out to him as Bnei Yisrael did over and over again in this book of Shoftim. And then in his loving grace, he picks us up, he dusts us off, he says, "Okay, I'm going to let you try this again. Here are my rules again. Here's what I want you to do." And what do? We do it well for a while, and then we stumble around, and we fall on our faces, and he picks us up, and he dusts us off. You know why? Because he loves us. Not because we deserve it. You think he does it because you deserve it, then that's a whole other message we're going to have to get into. But shame on us if we think he's going to do it forever. Shame on us if we forget that the God, the Elohim, who loves us, is also the one who set up judgment in the end. The woman bore a son and called him Shimshon. Your English probably says Samson. The child grew, and Yehovah blessed him. The spirit of Yehovah began to stir him when he was in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. And you know, people open the Brit and they say, look, the spirit of Elohim was on Yeshua as he was a child and growing in stature in front of Elohim and man. And the skeptics who know the Tanakh say, and these mainliners, most of them, shame on us if we fall into this category, but I did it for years. I get mad. Why don't you say that he is who he is? Because we're not giving him evidence. All we're doing is showing him he was a good Jew. He was blessed. They said, yeah, he was a prophet. We said, no, he's Mashiach. No, he's a prophet. Why can't you see his Mashiach? You ever show me anything so far that didn't happen to a shaw, much less a prophet? Now, this is supposed to be a study, and we're doing this lengthy study. We're going through the books to learn about good Jewish leadership led not by man, but through man by Elohim. But what I keep coming back to as I'm studying this is part of that leadership is we need to be able to teach who Mashiach is in context of the very scriptures that he taught. Because he didn't teach from Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. He didn't talk about the letters that Shaul or Kephas or anybody. He didn't talk about them. They talked about him. And they talked about him teaching from these scriptures. And yes, these scriptures provide everything we need to prove that he is who he is, but we got to know these scriptures. Woe to us, messianic believers in him, biological descendants of his same ancestors, Abraham and Yitzhak and Yisrael. If we don't know the scriptures that he taught and be able to use them to prove that he is who he is. Because if all we have is the scriptures written after him, after his coming, about him, that's never going to convince the people who've spent their entire lives studying the scriptures that came before him, that prophesied him, if all we do is refer back to things that happened to 10 other guys who just were good Jews.